All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm Emma Horrell. I manage UX here at Edinburgh University. And today I'm going to talk to you about an issue to do with Drupal's terminology that I've been leading for a while. It's going to be an honest reflection of how I've led this issue, hence the reference to cans of worms, which I'll come on to in a minute. So yeah, when I started with Drupal, this was back in 2020 when I joined the university as a content designer. And one of the things people said to me about Drupal is, it's quite hard to learn it, but once you get to know it, it's a lot better. And one of the things that feeds into that learning curve is the words in Drupal, so the terminology, the language that we use. This issue is all about trying to address that, I guess, in a small way, and trying to think about how we can open up the terminology, how we can make it easier for people to understand so it's less of a barrier, both for people within the Drupal community to do stuff that they want to do, and also for outside the Drupal community. So why the worms? Right, so unless you're familiar, if you're not familiar with the expression opening a can of worms, it's one of my favorites, and I'm going to talk about it a lot through this presentation. This is going to be an honest reflection, as I said, about leading this issue. I've learned a lot along the way, done a lot of things wrong. So there's I think within Drupal and within UX, which is what I'll do, and I'll come on to that in a minute, there's a tendency to look at something and think, well, there's an easy solution to that, right? That looks fine. And then you kind of dip in and you've opened the can of worms, and all of a sudden something you thought that was quite straightforward is definitely not, and you have the worms and you have to deal with it. So it's part of the process. So I'm going to talking you through this issue today. I'm going to give you a bit of introduction to me and what I do, me, UX, and Drupal. I'm going to talk about how this issue began, where it started, how it's going, how we're working through this, and kind of the end goal, I guess, towards that simplification, opening up Drupal through its terminology, how we're addressing that and the stuff we've learned along the way, and then, looking forward to what's next and where we're going to go next. So me and UX, as I said, I am the UX manager at Edinburgh University, and so my remit is digital experiences at the university, and there's a lot of them. We have a lot of digital systems here at the university. We also have a lot of audiences for those experiences, a lot of people doing stuff online at Edinburgh. And so my team, we're there to try and improve that a bit. So we have to prioritize. We have to go after the experiences that are the highest value to the university. And one of the systems that provides those experiences is our Drupal CMS, EdWeb, which Billy talked about in the intro. So that's used by hundreds of editors across the university. And obviously the stuff that they create from interacting with the system is then used by millions of people all over the world in different types of context. So prospective students, prospective researchers, prospective staff even, people that look at the university website to get a sense of what we do. So the way my team try and optimize those experiences is through a combination of user research and content design. So these are some of the things we do in a typical day. We do a lot of watching people interacting with interfaces and listening to them describe their experiences. We do a lot of mapping, drawing out journeys to get a sense of these experiences. We say zoom in and zoom out a lot, I do anyway. And opening up cans of worms, because often we look at interfaces and think, well, why could we not change that? And that would make the experience better. Understand a bit more about the system and realize why that's not an option. And spend a lot of time obsessing over words, which is, I will come on to that a bit later as well. And get excited about things that we can make better. So where does Drupal come in? Well, as I said, I've worked for the university since 2020, joined as a content designer, and one of the first systems I got to know was EdWeb. And it occurred to me how much we rely on Drupal at the university to do so much through EdWeb. And I wanted to learn more about the system. I could recognize that learning more about Drupal would help me do my job better. So I spent some time learning about Drupal, trying to understand it a bit better. And then in 2022, I started contributing, because it took me a while, being a non-developer, it took me a while to sort of work out if I could be useful to the Drupal community and how I could be useful, and where I would maybe fit in the community. So I started contributing to Promote Drupal and the usability group that meets regularly, and most recently, I've been honoured to have been asked to join the Starshot Advisory Council and contributing on the Drupal CMX UX initiative, which is super exciting and a whole nother talk. But if you're interested to know more, then please grab me today later on. For me, UX and Drupal go really well together because they're similar in that you can make a small change and it can have a big impact. In UX, as I said, that could be on an interface, could really improve an experience for someone. Within Drupal, the power of the community and the ripple effect, you can make a small change and it can have a big impact too. And again, they go well together because UX is a lot about surfacing problems and things that we can make better and improvements that potentially could be made. And Drupal is a powerhouse, as we know, of solutions. There are solutions generated for every eventuality, so they go well together. So what about Drupal terminology? Well, words matter, in short, in Drupal and in any digital interface, because when a person interacts with an interface, they're using the words on the interface to make sense of what they're doing. So they're using them to work out how they do their tasks. And the words that are there really have the power to kind of convince someone you're in the right place, you're doing the right thing, carry on with your task, you're going to achieve it, or to make them think, you know, maybe am I doing this wrong? Do I need to ask somebody? That kind of thing. So ultimately, the words that people read with everything that goes out in Drupal impact what gets built, what gets published, and how it gets built or published. So let me give you an example. I'm very pleased to say that this piece of text no longer exists on the editorial interface. But as Billy described with our path to roll out EdWeb 2, we went through an iterative process. And so one of the early releases that we put in front of our editors, you know, we were making sure that the functionality was there and paying less attention maybe to some of the finer tuning. So when we rolled out, this was at the end of sort of 2022, I did some usability testing with editors with this new platform to see how they were getting on. And somebody was going through the process of building out a generic page just to sort of test how it was going. And they were getting on really well and really enjoying the paragraph experiences. And then they hit this piece of text and they were like, wait, what? Reading it out. Start typing a title of a piece of content to select it. You can also, and they read it out. And it was such a shame because up until that point, everything was going fine. And this is a piece of text that's really, it's straightforward, right? It's telling you how to format a link. But it just threw them in that moment. And it just kind of stuck with me. And I thought, like, this is letting Drupal down. This could be better. Because it shouldn't spoil the experience that was up to that point really good. So, like, easy, end of talk, Emma. Just simplify the sentences, take them out. Turns out not so much, because when you zoom in, sorry, I said that a lot. Looking even just at that piece of help text, there's a lot of meaning in there. Each of those terms has got specific meaning, and it's there for a reason. So, you know, things like piece of content, what does that mean? Internal path, what does that mean? Exactly, you don't want to change that without knowing the context of it and what it was there for, because a quick change could completely change the meaning of the sentence. It could add even more confusion and variability into it. So this was kind of a side, and like the Drupal community, I'm kind of a newbie, to be honest, because I only sort of started helping out in 2022. And there are people in the community who've been doing this for years, right? And so this stuff has already been thought about, and there was already an issue in progress to restructure the admin interface, recognizing how important that interface is when it comes to getting a good experience out of Drupal. And that started in 2016. The Gin admin theme that Billy talked about that we've adopted at Edinburgh, that was an amazing progression, and that started in 2019, again, aimed at improving that experience of interacting with Drupal. And where those two things kind of came together and where I got involved was through a card sorting survey, excuse me. And that happened in 2023. So, sorry for the jargon, a card sorting survey is a UX technique. And basically what that does, in the context of the admin UI for Drupal, took all of the terms that were there, in fact all of the tasks that you could do in the admin UI, and made a card for each one. And the task that we presented the community with was to order those tasks into groups. And the idea behind that is that you then work out how people naturally expect things to be grouped together. And you can use that to sort of structure the admin interface. So you put things under the headings that people are kind of expecting. So the results of that card sort survey, which was run by Christina Chmias, who's pictured there, along with Sasha Eggenberger from the Gin admin theme, it showed quite a lot of outliers. What do I mean by outliers? Well, basically terms that people struggle to place. And none of these terms are particularly complex, but people didn't quite know where they would put them in the admin interface. So it suggested there's a bit of ambiguity about what these terms mean and how they should be used, and when somebody would look for a block, and when somebody would look for a node, and what context that task would be. And this was a kind of surprising result, to be honest, out of the card sort. And so what's great about Drupal is things like this spark off new issues. And that began the issue that I became involved in. So an issue was begun to locate Drupalisms that might create confusion among users. Ironically, we added another word in to describe what Drupalisms are. So a Drupalism is a term that makes sense if you know Drupal, but it could be confusing if you're starting out and trying to learn it. And so the idea was initially, let's just make a list of all of these terms. And so it wasn't just me doing this. I was there with some Drupal heavy hitters. One of them sat there, Aaron McHale. So yeah, we began this issue. Aaron and I ran a BOF following the initiation of this issue at DrupalCon Lille because we wanted to start the conversation going. We wanted to hear from the community. Okay, we're going to look into Drupalisms and we're going to find out what are the things that you find confusing. Help us surface these. So we had a good couple of conversations at both at the BOF and then later on at the conference on the contribution day about things that people found confusing and they were coming into questions about regularly. So we started a kind of Google sheet just on this straight away. And we updated the issue queue about what we were doing, and this prompted a lot of traction, which was good because people were interested, but equally we realized words are emotive, right? People know they've got meaning and they know where they've come from, and they wanted to share that. And so this comment is just sort of illustrative of what people were saying. So this was about Drupal referring to people as site builders, whereas in other realms they're called web developers. Why do we do that? Why does Drupal do that differently? And this comment is perfectly valid, but it made us think, you know, we need an objective approach to this. If we're going to try and have a measured look at terminology and try and make it better, we need some way of kind of being objective about it. So we looked at some frameworks for doing this kind of work. Ralph Koller, another Drupal massive guy that I'm sure many of you have heard of or worked with, he and I looked at some of these frameworks, how to make sense of any mess, object-oriented UX. I've just sort of named these here, but if you're interested, I can talk more about these. But yeah, so we looked for some kind of structure to help us guide through this. Did a bit of reading around those, and we came up with a 6-stage approach that we would go with to try and address this. So this was kind of deviating from the original plan for the issue, which was just to make a list of words. We were trying to think, you know, like stretch goal, how do we actually make a difference? How do we improve things? So we decided to start with the admin UI because that's where the card's sort of been done. And we decided to, we need to get an idea of what's in the admin UI first of all. So it's a process called word foraging, which basically means pulling out all the terms. And then once you had that complete list, we could do a bit of an evaluation based on how confusing people found them, how easy it is to define them, and then from that, decide which ones, you know, if we were going to build what we've called a control vocabulary for Drupal, if we were going to build a sort of definitive list, what would we include, what would we not include? Once we had that, it would put us in a good place to have translations for multilingual, and then through that process, we would need to, through kind of steps 1 to 5, I guess, work out a process through learning how we would actually go forward, because this is recognizing that Drupal's always moving, stuff's always getting added in, new features, new names, new terms are always coming in, so this isn't a static process. So how could we get sight of that and make sure that we were kind of again continuing towards the aim to simplify or open up? So how it's going is ongoing on step 1. Turns out, I said there would be bumps in the road and cans of worms. Turns out that is a colossal can of worm. There is a lot of words in there. And so that's ongoing. We have started evaluating them. We have a quiz, which I'll talk about in a minute, and we've also started looking at how we're defining them. We've started looking at the process to maintain the vocabulary, and we haven't started stages 3 to 5 because they're kind of dependent on the other stages. So here's what word foraging looks like and why. It's a bigger can of worms than we anticipated. So we started with the Drupal glossary because we thought, well, do you know what? Somebody's already done this hard work. We've got a list of terms here. There can't be many more, can there? Right. We've been going through the sections of the admin UI, Ralph and I. So far we have 680 nouns, 139 verbs, and 55 adjectives or adverbs. It started out as just a list of words, and then we started thinking, do you know, this is actually a label for something, and this is an action word. Do we need some way to segregate that? Yes. Add another column. Do we need to maybe know the context of this? Because there seems to be different ways of saying this, and is this the same thing or is this different? Add another column for context. And then, yeah, like here, so identifying different ways of saying the same thing, and also instances where a term is being used for multiple meanings. What we're also thinking about, and this is coming in later, I guess is like LLMs and AI that Christoph will talk about a bit later on, this is about language and how can we surface, how can we use, AI, LLMs to help us with this process. So that's kind of something that's in our mind, but we haven't started yet. I talked about the bigger process, and so Meg Plunkett had an idea to open an issue to keep track of words coming in from core contributors, to keep awareness, like basically to raise awareness with core committers that we're working on this issue, and also to kind of flag to them, think about the words that you're adding in so there's a bare issue summary template to help us kind of collect words as they're coming in, to keep track of that. On the evaluating understanding things, so like trying to surface the complexities and where the biggest, most priority complex terms are, we have a quiz that is ongoing until the end of the month. We put together, this is a quiz of 20 questions. Please feel free to complete it if you haven't already, if you haven't come across it. It's about surfacing, it's about testing our assumptions, what the most complex areas are. So the 20 questions are about concepts in Drupal, and there's basically 3 sorts of answers. It's either true, false, or I don't know. And this will help us sort of affirm either give evidence for or against our assumptions about what are the most complex areas based on what we've learned so far. Zooming out, we are learning from elsewhere, because it's not only Drupal as a CMS provider that looks at terminology. There are other CMS providers that are looking at this as well. Thankfully, the Open Website Alliance gives us the opportunity to interact with colleagues from other CMS providers. So through contacts met in various sort of circles, we've initiated meetings with Typo3 and are learning about how they're looking at their words and how they choose, how they name things. And one of the ideas that came out of one of the BOFs actually was referring to other defined standards such as W3C and schema.org to look at sort of areas of consistency there that we can draw upon. Dovetailing with Drupal CMS or Starshot gives us a huge opportunity because it's basically a blank canvas, to be designed for a marketer, non-technical audience. And this is, and my involvement in this has been sort of very much at the stages of, well, what do we want to put in front of people to give them the best experience and onboarding first impressions of Drupal. So choosing the words that go in those interfaces that they're going to encounter as they go through the demos. And the installation process and then further on to the dashboards is super important. And we've run voice and tone workshops already, trying to work out how we're going to talk about Drupal CMS and how we're going to be consistent both for the brand, but also to kind of capture the experience for non-developers. And yeah, very excitingly, we're starting to test what we have already, the MVP that Dries demoed at Barcelona with non-Drupal users, and hoping to fold those learnings in either for version 1 or for sort of further down the line. Okay, that's me. Sorry, I should say, I flipped past the question thing. If you're interested, I've given you a lot of information there. possibly quite a niche topic, but if you're interested to know more, please reach out to me. Join the Slack channel if you like. And yeah, there are a couple of articles there if you're interested to read more. Any questions? Hi.
Yeah, I don't think this is only for non-technical users or new users. Something that frustrates me all the time is if I'm navigating around Drupal.org and somebody's used an initial for something that they're using in their day-to-day kind of work.
Yep.
And I have no idea what that means. So you were talking about the Drupal UI. Do you think that there is work that we can do to improve Drupal.org and our communication on Slack?
Yeah.
Because that's where people are going to help.
100%. And when we started looking, when Aaron and I ran the BOF and people were kind of feeding in comments exactly as yours there, we needed to start somewhere is the short answer. So the admin UI was kind of, right, if we can start with that and start learning, then we can like open this out, because obviously documentation is a huge part of it. And as you said, Drupal.org, for Drupal.org, there is a style guide, but like all style guides, it relies on like, people knowing that it exists and how easy it is to implement it. So that's another area. And again, it's trying to kind of keep track of everything and then choose a part that you can make a difference in and test the process before you can go much wider. But certainly it's on the radar. But yeah, so yeah, thank you for that comment.
I guess we can get in the habit of when we see things, try and let people know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a slow burner, right? It's not going to get solved quickly, and it's a bit of a community effort as well. But I think trying to sort of identify things and just even think, is this going to, imagine if I was a person learning Drupal, how would this land? For me, even getting into that mindset is valuable, I think, to make improvements. Sorry.
Have you made any sort of proactive use of this in the University of Edinburgh context, like translations within your own admin interfaces, that sort of thing?
So, about 100 years ago, when I first started the university, I wanted to look at like the technical terminology, because when I joined the university, it was in COVID, and there was a huge thing about like, what's a VPN? People were asking, what's a VPN? Because they didn't know, because they'd never had to deal with one before. And that started, so I was lucky to get some money to work with an intern to start looking at this, but it was huge. So it did get shelved. There's a sad little blog of mine about it on the university website, because it is something that we would like to do. I mean, from my remit, the style guide, again, like coming down to prioritization, if we could really make a difference with words, it would be on our external facing website, because that's what people use to make an impression of the university. So having the style guide consistently applied across our web pages, ways that we could do that, and looking into AI potentially to be able to do that, to make it, because it's a difficult thing for people to add to their day lives, as thinking about how you write things. I have a journalistic background, so I find it quite natural, but I appreciate that a lot of people don't. So I guess you have to look at the people behind the process and the system before you can think about how, what's the best way to try and make an improvement. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, it's on the radar in my day job. Hello, sorry, I don't know who was first.
So I think this is great, because I find myself talking to clients and saying the Drupal word and then the explanation of what it is.
Yeah.
But for the community to actually get to where we need to, it also has to change what the definition is in the code as well.
Yep.
And if the admin interface is different to what it is in the code, that's likely to cause confusion
Yep.
between the people that are working with the admin interface and the people changing the sites.
Yeah, no.
It's probably way off ahead, but is there a plan at the moment to align those at the same time?
It's raising it, yeah, there is a plan to align those, and it kind of folds into the sort of process. So if we can start with the admin UI, and then, we're not going to make any changes, just to be totally clear. We're literally trying to surface issues, and it's a bit of trying to identify, prioritize what are the most complex thing, but also, you know, look at what it would be involved to change those. You know, we're not looking to like knee-jerk, like my example, I wouldn't knee-jerk change a term because, you know, it can have other ramifications. So it does need to be part of the process, but it's a big deal. Like even the admin UI is bigger than, I'll be honest, you know, we thought it was going to be. So I think if we can get through that and then like start having conversations with like the core committers and so on to try and understand, you know, what would be the ramifications of that. Maybe it isn't necessarily just a change of terminology as well. You know, maybe we need to do a better job of explaining what these things mean, because there are perfectly valid reasons for things having a name, and a name in Drupal that maybe is different from elsewhere. But it's just, you know, trying to like make that available to somebody new so that they don't feel it's a barrier to them. So yeah, a lot of work still to be done in what I would say like jargony UX term problem space before we can like think of solutions. And of course, everything that we would want to possibly implement, we look to test it with both the kind of non-Drupal audience as well as people that use things and maintain things already. So, thanks.
Yeah, that's amazing. First of all, it's really impressive.
Thank you.
I'm like huge, even with few things, or even like suggest solutions, even issues. But like moving forward, like in the long-term future, would it be a way? I don't know. Thinking also of the AI tools coming out a bit more in our everyday life, also as developer, but I think as any kind of role, like same way like we have to pull coding standards, and we kind of push as a developer to like, if that community needs to go, or if you want to have that approach, it needs to like actually like have those tests, and it needs to be
Yep.
successful. Would there be like a world where these kind of things could be added, like you add a new fields like your function module or your core module, and you have a help text, so I'm going to check the language you're using there, and maybe AI could help with that, because I guess
Keep
different
talking.
things-
I'm loving all of this. Yes, I hope so.
Is there like any realistic future where this could be a thing, or like?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really do hope so. I mean, it's a long
Yes.
way to get there. Okay, Aaron says yes, this can happen.
Well, no, just like
Just leave it to
because
you.
Realistic thing, like,
this
I don't
is
know,
like
Drupal 12
something.
kind of thing, or
Yeah, so like, so for those who don't know me, every week I'm on the Drupal usability groups meetings, and Emma, you come to a lot of them as well, and we see every week we're like looking at issues and reviewing them, and we see the same things in and out, so like the same issues come up. So
Yep.
for anyone who hasn't seen them, the Drupal user interface standards exist, but they're ironically not that usable.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
user-friendly.
Yeah.
Which is ironic. And so one of my personal like goals in life has become to like rewrite those and revamp those and make those something. But I wish I had more time to do it. Is the short answer.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's I was going to add that because it is something that.
Yeah, you're right. It's not. This issue isn't the only thing that's addressing that. So the usability group are like surfacing these all the time, and it's like knowing. It's looking for the patterns as well. It's understanding. Oh right, well that's like that because of that. Okay, so if we change that, then we also need to change that, because it's having that view of the whole picture, which is really hard to do in Drupal, like given the size and the scale of the community and how quickly things change. Is something I think we all struggle with. But yeah, certainly that's aimed for the future. And I do think with like the advent of CMS and that sort of starting again and having the like non-technical marketer person at the audience, it is making us question putting things in front of people. We shouldn't expect people to know what a recipe is. We shouldn't expect that like from day one they're just going to be led by how they want their website to work, or what they want to sell, or whatever they want to promote using their website. So it's a long-term thing, but I think it really will benefit the product going forward in the future. Yeah. Hi.
It's really interesting. It's something that like you know gets left on the side for so long, and then like you've noticed the repeat patterns that come up, and then eventually people start to work on it. Are you finding that there's like investment in this area? Like say for example, University of Edinburgh, do they
Apart from my time.
Yeah. So is it all just volunteer time at the moment, or is there anyone actually saying, yeah, like we're contributing this amount of time, so you feel this is the issue to put your time into?
Yeah, exactly that. It is volunteer time, and it's like so that's one of the things that stymie in the progress really, because we don't have somebody. You know, it is reliant on me and Ralph, who keeps messaging me going like, when are we going to continue with now foraging? And I'm like, not this week, Ralph. But yeah, so I guess we don't have it as a stage yet. I think like if we could get to the end of the sort of stage 1, we might have something to kind of violate. And also when we can, the quiz coming to an end, we've had like a couple of hundred people complete that. So I think those sorts of things can help us put together maybe a proposition for somebody to come and like help us or work with us or like adopt this issue, or that kind of thing is the hope. But obviously that's kind of another, yeah, I'm not too clear about how that happens, to be honest with you. So I'd maybe, if you have experience of that, I would love to chat, because it'd be interesting to know how you kind of get to that stage where you can get, because it definitely would accelerate it if we had, you know, buy-in, support from like elsewhere apart from just relying on volunteers. So
Makes sense. So,
yeah.
so the pattern is kind of the discovery work is volunteer-based, and then when you have something more concrete, you can say...
Yeah, to kind of put the proposal together, because for a long time we talked about like, you know, what can we do? Can we just make a list? What are we going to do? What's the point of making a list if we're not going to do it? You know, so we've gone through that many times.
I think usually also like that spreadsheet that you mentioned that has all those terms, like you guys should see this spreadsheet. Oh my gosh.
I didn't show it. I couldn't bring myself to put it on the screen.
No,
It's huge.
you wouldn't get the scale of it, that like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a
Yeah.
spreadsheet this big. And like the amount of work and effort that Emma and Ralph put into it is
Ralph more than me, but yeah, it's, yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Emma,
Thanks.
I was at your hall, thank you, and I saw the spreadsheet, wow. When you're talking about potential funding, sponsorship,
Are you going to sponsor us? Thank you.
Drupal CMS Starship, there's a big drive on that.
Mm,
There's going to be lots of marketing and work on that, and the words are important. So is there a potential sponsorship around that?
potentially.
On CMS rather than
Yes.
the legacy that is Drupal, which is 650,000 lines in a spreadsheet. You know.
There is. Yeah, there is. Good point. Haven't investigated, but yeah, there is.